Yeah, we're going to be doing this whole thing where like the frame of my video is here for a while. I mean, I have 2 other YouTube channels where you get to see my face, but I did a song like this and I kind of liked how it came out. It was a song for this channel, but that'll be coming down the road. Anyway, so this is sort of my political channel, as you know. I'm only stating that here because it's like the 3rd video on this channel, and I have several topics that I want to talk about, but for today's video specifically, I wanted to focus on libraries, which might seem a little bit strange, but it is worth noting that libraries are a public service often funded through taxes, right? I'm sure that there are like private libraries and things like that too, but generally speaking, and you might think, if you were somebody who does not often go to or has not been to a library in a very long time, that you go there to check out books or maybe use the internet on occasion because they have computers there. But there are so much that you can get out of a library. It is honestly insane, and they're sort of my pinnacle, if you will, my go-to example of what government could provide for us. I wanted to tell you a bit of a story. So I live in a trailer, and with a trailer comes maintenance, as you may or may not know if you experienced this yourself. I've got some little lights directly above me that run through an extension cord that's stapled to the wall, like silly little things. Obviously, we make some changes to it, but when we bought this place, we were not privy to some certain information. It was very clear when we got it that the seller had kind of dolled the place up, made it look real nice, real presentable to maybe say lure in some unsuspecting buyers that we were. But we needed a house at that point in time. And so this works, and it still works. But it did have some problems. And one of those problems we didn't know about when we purchased this place was a pretty major water leak, which prevented water from flowing throughout the house. We didn't know about it because we were told by the seller that the water was currently turned off because, well, he's selling the place. He turned off the utilities but left the electric on so he could show people around the trail, whatever. Anyway, point being, the water turns out, no, it was not off. At least it wasn't off via the utility service. It was turned off at the main. And why was that? Because there was a massive leak that you could hear walking through the house when the water was turned on. So I had to go out of my way to make a repair on this. And there are easy ways to do it. I say easy within, quotes, because you probably want to have some experience doing some of this stuff. But specifically, this was a piece of old PVC that had just burst, right? So really no water was actually making it into the house itself. Okay, fair enough. I can get up underneath the trailer. I can get to it. But if I wanted to do a pretty decent job with this, I could buy some new PVC, a PVC, the solvent. I cannot remember what it's called right now. It doesn't terribly much matter here, and that's only a handful of bucks. But I wanted to make sure that if I did this, I did this right. So I went out of my way to buy into another system, an updated system, if you will, using PEX, which is a sort of PVC adjacent type of piping. Yes, we're getting to the library thing, trust me. And in so doing, the store that I worked at that was selling these products also sold some equipment to install them that made them relatively quick and easy. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try this, but one caveat, there's a bit of a paywall to get into this system. You see, it's not like you go out of your way and buy like a welding torch and fittings and use some solder or anything like that. These are not metal pipes, and you wouldn't be buying the solvent for these PVC pipes because these weren't PVC either. They didn't react in the same way. However, this system, which is a crimp-based system, and it works well. I was in a fairly confined space, and the tools I bought all worked wonderfully. But I had to pay well over $100 to do them, to repair one pipe. Now, if I was a plumber, that's a good investment, right? Because if that was my job, $100 one time for a piece of equipment that just works, that just does the job, no problem at all, that's a pretty phenomenal deal. I still have no idea if that, company is as reliable today. This is back in like 2018 when I did this, but suffice to say, I did not keep that item. Of course not. I repaired one pipe, the pipe that was busted, and we have not since had a pipe bust. So had I spent that $100, I would have gotten one use out of it. Would it have been worth it? Yes, arguably. Of course. $100 to get water back is worth it. but it would just be a large tool taking up space in a pretty finite space here in a trailer that I would basically never get use out of again unless once again something broke. So I went ahead and returned this item that I used once. The item itself having been well over $80. The other 20 or so was spent on the parts, but bear with me here. So I get my $80 back. I did not damage the product in any way. And I look at this. You may see this as being unethical, right? You may think of this as, well, a store sold me an item, so if I return it, that's disingenuous. But I could just as easily say, well, no, I sold it back to the store, right? Or I could also say I borrowed the item and I put a little bit of money forward as a bit of collateral, if you will. And you can start to see this as, okay, maybe you don't agree, but you can start to understand that logic a bit more. Libraries, I almost want to say they work in a way that's sort of similar to this, but flipped over. And it's a way that I much prefer. A similar thing had happened with our roof, where we had a leak in our roof, and being a trailer with a fairly round, sort of spongy roof, doesn't feel terribly comfortable to be on, but I did not have a ladder here to get up there, so I went and bought a ladder. A ladder that I was only realistically going to be using once. Technically, we did have a ladder at the time, but it was being borrowed by somebody out of state. That's not terribly important, so I had no idea when that was going to be back, but I needed this thing patched now, so I did the same thing. Bought a ladder, used it to climb onto the roof, did the work that I needed to do, and then I put the ladder away. Again, no damage to the ladder at all. In fact, I took care of it. I made sure to sort of wrap where it was going to be contacting the trailer with cloth, so as to keep it from like getting scratched up and getting scuffed up. And because I was not going to return it if I damaged it, that to me would be unethical. Absolutely, especially with something like a ladder that someone puts their faith and sort of their life into at some points in time. A library is fascinating to me because you can go there and you can check out books. And if that's all you ever do with it, you're getting a wonderful bang for your buck, because your buck is basically just the taxes you already pay. It is free at the point of service. There are some things that you can use at a library that are paid, notably like making copies and things like that. And that makes sense. Those are consumable items, the ink in those printers or copying machines, etc., right? But generally speaking, you're going to be getting a lot for your free service. And there's more that you can get out of a library than just books. Did you know, in many cases, though every library district is different, you can check out cooking supplies, not just cook books, but like actual skillets and things like that. It's fascinating and it's phenomenal. Or fishing poles and kits, so you can go and fish or teach your child fishing, right? Like those are memories for people, key memories. My dad loves to go fishing. I could sell the idea of a library to him, even though he has a little bit more of a, I want to say, conservative leaning at some point, specifically in the direction that does not personally affect him, because that's most conservatives, right? They're liberal when something is on their chopping block, when something is being taken away from them. But if it's being taken away from somebody else, oftentimes, okay, well, that's fine. Then I'm conservative. Then sure, take it away from them because they're not me, right? And that's a bad way to think about it, because we are a society. No matter what you want to think, when you go home and live cornered in your walls, in your castle, you may have no interactions with anybody in the outside world, but they are still there, and inevitably you're going to be sharing this world space with them. So you might as well fight for their rights too, because if their rights suck, if their roof is being threatened, if they're going to lose their house, that's a stressor, right? And it can be difficult sometimes to work with stressful or stressed out people. We all break at some point. We all can lash out at some point. It happens to the best of us. But all that being said, I just recently found out that you can even check out things like GoPros, outdoor cameras, from libraries as well. And as somebody who loves to go hiking, for one thing, outdoors, I love nature. I love the outdoors. I've posted videos on my main channel, which is not about plants. It's about Lego stuff that you see behind me. But I've made videos about plants on that channel too, because I love so many things. I have so many passions. And that is a really enticing one for me. And even though I never knew about it, I cook, but I have all the utensils that I need in my house. So that never interested me to go out of my way to check out, pots and pans or what have you. But I love knowing that that service is there, and it's why I support it. It may not benefit me. I may never use it, but it's there. And even before I found out about something like the GoPro, which I could feasibly see myself using in the future, or that you can check out internet hotspots so you can take internet with you on the go. That stuff is phenomenal. And even before I knew about those things that I would much more realistically go out of my way to use, I was still in support of this thing. I like to fish on occasion, but it's not something I tend to do with other people. I'm much an introvert, and I've had enough memories with my father going fishing with him and family going fishing with them to more or less be kind of frustrated when you catch a fish and they steal your spot, right? And so oftentimes if I were to go fishing, it might be once every handful of years, and I just take myself, right? Just me alone enjoying the world out there. More often than not, though, I'm not actually fishing, but I'm walking around a lake and just exploring, looking at cool plants and running across frogs and bugs under rocks and things. Like, I love that kind of stuff because, once again, nature is beautiful. And I don't do it to keep fish. I do it to just kind of enjoy and see them close up, I guess, right? But with all of that set aside, in much the same way as I do cook, but I don't need cooking supplies, as I do fish, but I don't need fishing supplies, I am so grateful that those are just services that the library provides that you may never even know about, because everybody's so worried about books being banned. But let me ask you this. If I was to say I wanted to borrow one of these items from a neighbor of mine, you probably wouldn't have any objections to that, right? That is sort of a private transaction, if you will. If I needed to borrow my neighbor's lawnmower because mine was on the fritz or something, and they were, generous enough to say, yeah, sure, just make sure you bring it back or top off the gas, whatever the case may be. Like, that's a lovely interaction right there. So why do we not also extend that interaction to a public service like a library, and then think about it as though I'm not checking out books from the government. The government's not pushing an agenda when you ban a book, but rather they just have a wide array of books of which I can borrow from if I so choose and I need. Because there are many people out there who need to read books about maybe medical conditions that they have, or just to kind of find themselves in a better space, whether it be fiction or non-fiction. Work out there, religious texts and cultural texts, genealogy books as well. All of that stuff is incredibly important, and I love that that is a service that is available free to us. Now, it's not to say, well, what if someone just stole the items that they checked out? That can happen with libraries. Absolutely. You check something out, you don't return it. Sometimes because you just want it, and that happens. People steal. That's just a reality of the world we live in. But sometimes it is through means that are explicable, right? You check out a book and your car breaks down and you're not able to get anywhere for 2 or 3 weeks until the part for your car comes in. We've been there. I've been there. And so, whether or not that is the case, in cases like that, I think that if you bring the item back later on, if there's a fee involved, as long as it's not astronomical, I can understand that. And in many cases, libraries these days will even waive fees as long as you've returned the item. I had a sibling return an item at a library like 4 years down the line because they had lost it and then found it later. And they're like, no charge. Nope, it's fine. It's like, nope, no big deal. We got it back. That's cool. And there are people who donate to libraries and things like that as well. So I don't look at libraries as this indoctrination center. Even if they were, you have the choice to go in there, right? In much the same way as you can choose to go into a church or any religious facility, which you can just as easily see as an indoctrination center. Ultimately, it's up to you if you go. Nobody forces you to go to the library. That's sort of the price you pay to access it, right? You walk or ride your bike, take public transit, or drive your car, whatever the case may be, to go to the library. And that's what you put in. What you get out of it is the knowledge that they provide, the services that they provide, the internet access, or even just a warm place to stay, because I've been there too. Libraries, in a lot of ways, are fundamental to this country. And if you really, truly appreciate this country, you should know that, because they were introduced alongside essentially the founding of this country. If conservatives really wanted to conserve, they would conserve that too. But it's never about conservation to them. If they wanted to conserve, they wouldn't be threatening our wildlife and our national parks. But they are, because what they want to conserve is what they want. They want resources, they want power, they want control, they want to be able to dictate what we are able to do with our own lives, what we have access to, what we are allowed to read in our free time. It's up to us, but they want to take that away from us. The little things that make us human are the choices that we make and where that leads us, but they want to take away those choices so that we are all fundamentally the same. Sheep, easy to control, whatever you want to call it. I almost compare it to breaking the spirit of an animal, getting you to obey through some form of abuse. There are so many videos out there that you can go out and watch where you see elephants painting pictures, a testament truly to how intelligent animals like the elephant are, and they are. But I don't enjoy those videos because I know what goes on in the background to create them. Abuse. Those animals are hurt and often killed when they disobey their owners. And for what? A little bit of money from tourists to make their owners richer? That's a disgusting world, and that's the world we live in. But all we see, all we are shown as the public, is an animal painting. And yes, we can look at that and admire it. We can admire the craft that these animals, or in some cases people, are able to create, but we have to understand the underlying message behind it too. Those elephants aren't creating artwork because they want to, rather because they're forced to, through pain, through being stabbed in many cases, or having their food source cut off. There are so many instances of these animals being killed. For what? Because they didn't perform the task. They weren't up to snuff with what we wanted out of them. And it's ultimately how this world seems to operate more and more often. That if you do not do what is required of you, then you're disposable to them. Here's the thing. Nobody is disposable. Nobody is undeserving of the rights to define their own life, to pursue their own happiness. Happiness means something different to each of us. Always valid, mind you. I don't want to live in a world where everybody looks and dresses the same and celebrates the same holidays. I'm a white man that lives in the middle of the United States, and yet through the things that that I have behind me, of which my Lego channel is about, my primary channel is about, what little toys like these taught me about the world is they open a door to new cultures. If you know the story behind those Bionicle sets, and I talk about that on my primary channel, they were heavily inspired in their beginning by the Polynesian culture. My personal favorite culture to learn about, maybe just before Mesoamerica. There's so much beauty. And if conservatives really wanted to conserve, why would you not conserve that too? Who makes the decision where in time we draw the line on what there is and is not worthwhile conserving? Because if you conserve, if that's really truly your goal, you should be willing to conserve everything. But remember, this country was founded on slavery too, and nobody wants that conserved. Well, that would be my hope. Anyway. If you're here watching this, I have to hope that you are somebody who has compassion for your fellow human beings, who takes a little bit of pride in the library's existence. It's not hurting you, but it is helping somebody. And it's always worth noting too that when proposals to cut these services are put into play, it is never at the behest of us. It is never towards our benefit. We're not going to recoup any of the money we pay in much the same way as conservatives right now are threatening to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, food stamps, and more. They're not talking about giving that money back to us. No, we'd still be paying in. It's just they would reallocate that money to their own interests. Right now, this country is effectively being run solely, single-handedly, away from the checks and balances that this beautiful country was founded on, solely to enrich himself. He has gone out of his way to secure further taxpayer money towards his own companies to the tune of nearly $500 million in just a month. He has made himself $150 billion richer in a month. This is theft, blatantly. And if you cannot see that, I don't know how to convince you. On its face, theft is not nuanced. It is the reason why someone steals that you can take a look at. When someone takes something off of a store shelf and walks out the door with it, you can understand, at least to some degree, that oftentimes it is being done because they need something. Most people do not go out of their way to steal because it's fun. Some do, absolutely. And there are wealthy people who steal often too. Wealthy people who shoplift, as crazy as it seems, because to some people it's just a fun little prank that they play. It's a joke that they play. It's a high that they chase. But to some people, that theft is their meal for tonight. And we punish that. We plaster those faces all over media. To what effect? You don't often see a rich person's scam plastered on media, but be aware that the rich scam us every day. The dropping of funding for something like the NLRB, and I don't want to say the acronym, but the words National Labor Relation Bureau, essentially the power arm of unions that without unions would have no power. And if you are somebody who is in a union, you know what kind of power that they can bring. I worked with somebody when I was getting my business administration degree. I was being also talked to by another worker who had taught classes on painting and who talked very adamantly about joining unions to all of the people who took his course. Not trying to teach them not to join unions, not trying to spread some lies and conspiracies and propaganda about them all being corrupt, as though you can make that blanket statement. I could make the same blanket statement about all corporations being corrupt, but that's not true fundamentally. There are a handful of good corporations, and there are many fantastic unions who go out of their way to fight for us all. And this union worker was making over $100 an hour teaching his craft to the next generation, and he stated quite frankly that if he had not been a member of the union, that he would not be making $100 an hour. He would not be able to support his family. He would be making somewhere around $20 to $25 an hour for the same work, the same input, the same output as well. But because he had a union behind him, he was able to negotiate for better terms for himself. And if he was screwed over, he would have access to something like a legal system designed to fight larger industries. One of the reasons that a company like Walmart fights so adamantly against unions is because when you were to go out of your way to sue Walmart because of something that they have done wrong to you, they do not want you having access to legal rights and protections and being aware of the rights that you do have. I was once told, and often told, when I worked for Walmart and when I'd worked for other retail spaces, that I have a right to defend myself in a course of action where maybe a mass shooter were to come into the store and try to shoot the place up or try to harm me or even just an irate customer. And that is true. Legally, you do have the right to defend yourself. So they cannot tell you not to, because it would be against the law. But what they can do is fire you after the fact for being a liability. And that's exactly what they do. I've heard so many people say, well, why don't they tackle the shoplifters when they run out of the stores? Because legally, they cannot. I mean, technically, who's going to stop them? It's he said versus she said. But Walmart will make quick work of the associate that makes that tackle or the associate that punches a dangerous customer, Because to Walmart, you've just become a cost to them, a liability, a threat. Through your action of defending your own life, something which we all have the right to do. When Musk talks about dissolving, let's say, dissolving something like the CFPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, that is something that actually pays us money. We don't pay into it. It pays us money. The government pays into it, but we taxpayers do not. It is funded directly from the Fed. But even if we did, let's say, even if it was paid through taxes, to play devil's advocate, it costs about $800 million a year. That sounds like a lot. Absolutely. And I mean, to any individual person, it is. That's more than enough money to live on for your entire life. But spread across 300 million Americans, it's not quite so much. It's about $3 per person. Okay, but what does it get out? Well, last year alone, over $20 billion was given back to American citizens thanks to the efforts of the CFPB. Mind you, I should mention that Tesla and Elon Musk and SpaceX all had cases in front of these companies. Now you know why they're so adamant to go over that kind of spending, but they're not willing to go out of their way to cut something like defense, for which we recklessly spend and waste money every year. The Pentagon has failed the last 7 audits that we've given it, but auditing is apparently so important to people like Elon Musk. Why would you not cut something out of that? It is near the largest expenditure this country makes is in defense. We have the largest military in the world. We're not currently in any active wars, though that could change at any moment with the current administration. And yet, somehow, we're still just letting it slide by. But it is worth noting that Elon Musk does make money directly through defense. So, of course, they don't want to cut any of that. And not just Elon Musk, many of their friends, many wealthy people. In a lot of ways, defense in this country acts as a way of just basically laundering money. Let's be honest. There are many projects that we fund that by the time they are finished, they're out of date and never see actual use. And it is worth noting, too, that we're spending so much money just on a fundamental level on figuring out how to kill people more creatively. Say about that what you will. We can have disagreements about it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if what you care about is your money, then you should not be fighting against someone who wants to cut Social Security, something that you have paid into your entire working life, something that without which we would be homeless. And many people would. Social Security alone is responsible for keeping over 60% of seniors out of poverty. If that were to be cut, most of those seniors would go homeless. If something like Medicare or Medicaid was cut, many seniors who rely on those could be pushed out to the street. Can you imagine that? Here, right now, it is the middle of winter. We have a week stretch where it's going to be below freezing entirely. And if Medicare and Medicaid were cut today, when my mom was getting her rehab back in August, if things had been a little bit different and she was getting rehab right now, and that was cut, she'd be on the street in sub-zero temperatures in a wheelchair because she cannot get around on her own. Fundamentally, that would have killed my mom. Something that she paid into her entire life. Because these people want to say, oh, it's wrought with corruption. Well, no shit. Everything has corruption. But we should go after the most corrupt things first. And maybe the most corrupt people. Because I want to make it very, very clear that systems are not innately corrupt. We create them. And if we create them, then we create the conditions for which they are able to operate in corruption. We create an environment that is conducive to corruption because that corruption benefits the wealthy. Nothing fundamentally changes in this country because we continue that tradition, the truly American tradition. This country is the wealthiest in the world, but you or I probably don't feel like it is. We say, where? Where is that reflected in our own society? How often do you interact with, positively, mind you, a millionaire or billionaire in your own life, and then think about how often you pass by somebody who is much closer to the circumstance that you are currently facing right now. Because yes, I am in poverty, but even if I had not been, even if I had $100,000 or $1 million for that matter, I would be making the same arguments. Because you know what? $1 million is a lot fucking closer to zero than it is to $1 billion. Understand that. When we talk about the 1% and the 0.1%, we're talking about the most corrupt individuals that did not work harder than any of us. No one is under the illusion that Jeff Bezos works 1 billion times harder, is 1 billion times more productive than any other individual. Rather, it is the people who work under him, the people under his thumb, trying to push back. And he allows a little pushback for staving off some kind of power play that the little people might have. It is worth noting that we outnumber them. And I often think about it a bit like a Plinko game. If you're someone who is familiar with The Price is Right, then you know what that is. But fundamentally, in this scenario, Plinko is the wealthy at the very top, hoarding all of their money, the resources that are the planets, not theirs, the planets, and all of the material goods, and just occasionally dropping pennies down the Plinko machine to watch them bounce around and watch us scavenge over them, over each other, like it's Black Friday, to grab every possible penny that drops. And we try desperately to stand on the little posts in between the prizes at the bottom. But in this case, there are no prizes. They're things like medical debt or student loans that if you can't precariously balance on those posts, you'll fall into. Or if you are allured by the falling penny that goes aside you, you may jump in after it. But your sights have been on the wrong thing this whole time, because Plinko fundamentally does have one thing that we can use: a ladder. In this case, several posts that stick out of the board, but bear with me here. I know that the analogy is falling apart a little bit, but we can climb that ladder. We can grab these posts and make our way up. And as we do, mind you, the rich will fight harder. They'll drop larger amounts of money. Pennies will turn into nickels, to turn into dollar bills, and so on, because that's nothing to them. But to us, at some point, that money becomes life-changing, and we turn around and we're willing to fall back down to the bottom, or worse, to put up a shield and hold it against the fellow people that we grew up with and that we shared our society with, to defend the people at the top. But we've been bamboozled. We've been fooled. We've stopped our progress to the top. And I want to let you know, too, you should not climb to the top to join the members that are currently there, rather to topple the system, because the system as it is right now is broken. And if your goal is to become the rich, become the oppressor, then all you want to do is have a change in management, and you want yourself to be the manager. But that's no way to live, because at that point, the only thing that happens is you turn yourself into the target of the poorer people and the oppressor of the poorer people. So the target, rightfully so. You become the person who punches us in the face, and we have a right to defend ourselves. You cannot get mad when we do. The wealthy like to pretend that they have more time and more power than we do. And for all intents and purposes, they do. But they don't really. Because at the end of the day, time is the same for all of us. And power ultimately is in here. It's our heart. I don't mean that metaphorically, of course. I mean, when our heart stops, our power stops too. They have one heart like we do. Billionaires can only last forever so long as we allow it, so long as we fight amongst ourselves, so long as we chase those falling pennies. But if we don't, if we ignore the little flashy objects and continue our climb to the top with the intent on toppling the system, that is when we can form something better in its place. Getting to the top is not enough, but helping your fellow man get to the top along with you is admirable. And the top is not being wealthy. The top is not being the owner, class in charge of the working class. The top is us. It's the system reversed. It is the Plinko machine turned upside down, so that the large majority of the people hold the power, as a democracy claims it should be. Anyway, I've talked long enough, but I do hope you'll stick around on this channel because I plan on doing many more videos like this. Of course, you can check out my main channel, which is a Lego channel. It's just Skybird here on YouTube, or Skybirdmakes elsewhere online. And you can also find me over on Blue Sky as Bestest Leftist over there. I post daily. I'd like to think I post some bangers, but that's up to you to decide. And of course, if you want that face reveal, I mean, I already did it in a previous video, and of course, elsewhere online. People know who I am. Doesn't make me any better than anybody else. But I want to fight for you. I'm a leader. I'm not a boss. Let's lock arms. But, make sure we clean up a little bit first. Anyway, I'll see you all in the next one. I hope you're out there staying warm and spending your time with the people you love. Because the time, that's the thing we all have that we don't get back when we give it to somebody else. Take it back. It's ours. Take care.